following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. Hello, listeners around the world on radio, streaming, and podcast services. This is It's Not Therapy. I'm Liana and I am not a therapist, but I am your source for navigating the madness of mental health using my top 10 sayings for going good crazy. This week, we're going to talk about adulting. Apparently, people of all ages don't know how to do it. Now, right off the bat, this isn't going to be a "these kids today" episode. I know people in their 50s who still behave like children. We talk about adulting as a series of tasks or some sort of sacred knowledge of how to do things that just somehow appears in your brain when you turn 18. But adulting is really about having dignity, emotional regulation, and, well, knowing what to do when you don't know what to do. Let's start with that last one first, because let's face it, in the age of absolutely everything being on YouTube or TikTok, the idea that people don't know how to do personal grooming or things like laundry because their parents never taught them doesn't really pass the BS test. Perhaps their parents didn't insist on them doing it, so they never got in the habit of doing it. That's fair, but I was never taught how to make a curry or cook Asian noodles. I learned. Yes, being raised in a pressure cooker where mistakes were treated as the worst thing in the world made that more difficult. But let me tell you, being self-sufficient with stuff like this is pretty great for your confidence, especially in a world where people are rather open about how worthless women in our 40s are unless we're spending a lot of money still trying to look 20. I read green that-ish. Yeah, people don't find me handsome, they can still find me handy. And I didn't bring up that tangent out of nowhere. A serious mark of non-adult is someone obsessed with people's looks, fertility, pronouns, bathroom habits, or anything else that reduces a person to a collection of body parts. People aren't just gametes, for God's sakes, grow up. Happy Pride. 3 major skills that are required for successful adulting are learning how to be embarrassed, learning how to be confused, and learning how to be afraid. No, really, you get passably decent at these things, you'll be able to successfully adult. Oh, add learning how to be disappointed to that list. If you're coming at things from a childish perspective, the minute you feel embarrassed, confused, afraid, or disappointed, you erupt and insist someone fix things immediately, or you run away with that explanation. If you're adulting, you can accept you're feeling a negative emotion, process it in a reasonable amount of time, and get back on track. Basically, stop being embarrassed or disappointed or afraid or whatever that you don't know how to cook, do laundry, get your snow tires changed, or do your taxes, and seek out someone who can teach you. It's fine to not know things. You didn't know how to use your phone at one point, right? Or a computer? These are more complicated things to learn than reading laundry labels. Again, it's okay to not know things. It's okay to make mistakes. No, really. Now, I've been told by those who struggle with adulting that they've been conditioned to believe that's not so, that it's not okay to make mistakes. It's not okay to know things. Yet people have told me about things like "you should know this" thinking and good kid syndrome. Basically, people under 35 were raised in an environment where they were made to feel like an annoyance when they didn't know how to do something. "You should know this by now" was apparently a mantra preached at children of the 1990s. But they didn't know it, and it apparently led to a shame spiral that's lasted decades. And okay, that's a good reason. But is it possible to change that internal narrative? Yes, absolutely, right? There comes a point in time where everyone disappoints their parents. But you have to live for you, and they can't do it for you forever as much as they might try. Top 10 phrase: don't let problems that aren't your fault lead to mistakes that are. Let's face it, in the short term, it's easier to take laundry home to your mother instead of doing it yourself. But at some point, you need to stop being afraid of adulthood or resenting adulthood or insisting you don't have time for adulthood and just adult. The whole idea of adulting is something you do instead of something you are. Some people hate this, but personally, I think it's pretty great because it is active. You don't get anywhere if you're too afraid to do anything. Facing fear is a skill that involves multiple parts. Recognizing you're afraid, deciding whether it's a valid fear, then deciding what to do about it. And a lot of people skip at least one of those steps. So let's talk about that after the break. Do you have a story you think would be good for the show? Are you interested in sponsoring the show? Liana at nottherapyshow.com. Nottherapyshow.com is the website. At nottherapyshow on social media. Yeah, I'm afraid of going too late in the first segment like I did last week. So I'm going to break early this time so we can further our conversation about adulting. It's not about cooking and laundry. It's about a lot of internal stuff when we come back on It's Not Therapy. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back and It's Not Therapy. I'm still Liana Kersner. I'm still not a therapist. We are still talking about adulting. What is it exactly and how do you do it? This episode was inspired by the fact that certain colleges and universities are doing online courses in adulting for their students. But they're not really getting in the nuts and bolts of it. Before the break, we talked about what adulting actually is, as opposed to what people think it's about. Adulting, isn't about knowing how to cook or do laundry or mow the grass or any of that stuff. Adulting is the ability to regulate your emotions, carrying yourself with a certain amount of dignity and independent problem solving. And fear, which we touched on before the break, interferes with all these things if you don't learn how to recognize and process it. A lot of people have a relationship to fear with no nuance. Either they don't admit anything scares them, or they insist everything must stop if they're afraid. People are like, yeah, I know both of those types of people, right? Neither option is really conducive to adulting. Everyone is scared sometimes, and if you're not feeling your fear, it is owning you. And everything doesn't just stop every time you get scared. Deciding what to do about being afraid is a major pillar of adulting. So most people just don't do adulting because it's hard and you don't get immediate rewards of attention or a pat on the head for it, right? Putting fear in its proper place requires you to know what your core values are, which is why I say top 10 phrase, core values are more important in relationships than common interests. Again, a lot of people don't like thinking about subjects like this, things like core values, putting fear in its proper place, because it means making choices and sometimes doing hard things. So people get into a loop where people expect them to either blow up or freak out when they're frightened, and they train the people around them to enable their fear responses instead of learning a better way to handle it. And here's the motivation for learning a better way to handle it. It does wonders for your confidence. When you can do something hard, I won't say it's the greatest feeling in the world, not right away, but later on, you can go, you know what? I've done hard things before. Didn't always work out, but I survived and I'll do it again. Every time I do one of these shows, I'm a bit afraid. This is deeply personal stuff. It's tough to talk about. There's a lot of cruel people out there, and some people think this song is about them. So people send nastiness via the contact form on the website. So send me some nice stuff on the contact form on the website if you think of it. Because, yeah, the negatives tend to motivate people a lot more than the positives. But I keep doing this show because of those people that say, it's helpful. I really like that show. It's compassionate and good. But also, I believe in doing what I can to get the best mental health information possible out there. And of course, it's not going to be perfect. I make mistakes. Things change. I try to offer a plurality of views. That's why I have guests on, because nothing is going to work for everybody. We know that. And so some people are going to go, you're dead wrong, just because, they lack the perspectives of other people. Of course, there are risks to manage in something like this, right? Trying to ignore that. Being fearless would be being reckless. That wouldn't do any good. There's a certain point where if I'm really dreading something every time I do it, I realize something has to change. And there were periods with this program where it was too hard. People were too mean and people were going out of their way. I mean, they still are, but I've gotten used to it to just make me into this evil thing who is using people. It's all nonsense, right? But it was really scary when people just kept saying untrue things online and wouldn't stop, right? I had to decide what I wanted to do about it. I don't expect other people to solve my problems for me. It's great when people help, but I'm responsible for me. And if you hear a strange noise in the background, that is one of my cats snoring. It sounds a bit like a monster farting. A tiny monster. Okay, we love the tiny monsters. Okay, getting back to this idea of I'm responsible for me, you're responsible for you. Believe it or not, this is an offensive concept to a lot of people. The idea that I'm responsible for me, they're responsible for them. I don't make anyone do anything. So if I'm feeling afraid of someone, what the heck is actually going on there? Is there really a risk? Can they do something to me? Why am I submitting myself to that? We're supposed to live in a free and fair society, right? So what's going on? Usually some sort of social programming that I can choose to break. Some fear of an emotional consequence. That, is it really worse than current circumstances? Yeah, sure, there's consequences to everything. Making choices and accepting consequences is peak adulting. Those consequences are what terrify some people so much that they'd rather not adult. And maybe that's easier in the short term, sure, but it's not better. What that means is you're going to continually compromise those core values, sometimes because you don't know what they are. And because you're constantly compromising your core values, you're constantly feeling miserable and full of shame. It is possible to be happy, and adulting is the way to happiness. No, really. I've talked about happy math on the show before, but what it really is, this is how it's done. Is this thing making me miserable? Is the misery getting me anywhere? If it's not, why am I doing this? And how could I do it differently in a way that is slightly happier, right? The happiness, the little tiny bits, the little improvements do add up to happiness. It's not this, I'm going to get this one big goal and I'm going to have this one big success and just coast on that for the rest of my life. That isn't how it works. It's little happy credits that you add up, month to month, week to week, day to day, hour by hour, even minute by minute. Do something to make yourself happy right now, like me continuing to listen to my cat snore. It's a very weird noise. The joys of recording from home. Yeah, okay. People talk about responsibilities and whatnot. Somebody would be, that's not very professional. That's not very mature. Mature, yeah. Here's the thing. Most people live lives of angry misery because they can't be themselves. and they don't truly accept responsibility for their choices. Life is too short to spend around terrible people, yet so many people do it. Getting back to the housework and laundry, if there isn't a single person in your social circle that you feel comfortable enough to ask how to do that stuff, what the heck is going on in your life? Not one person? The concept, when you think about it that way, it defies belief, right? An entire generation of people without basic adult life skills. It's not true. Young adults, plenty of young adults, know how to do this stuff. I've seen it with my own eyes. If your kid keeps bringing their laundry over to your house and you don't like it, instead of going, kids today, how about suggesting that you show them how to do it so they can do it for themselves instead of you doing it for them? I grew up at Jane Finch. Basic life skills like cooking and learning how to do, like how to start a fire, how to navigate the wilderness, stuff like that, like zombie apocalypse survival stuff. This was taught to us to help us with our self-esteem. We were told it builds character. So if if you own your home and you've got 2 cars minimum in that garage and your kid can't do laundry, help them learn. Yeah, this all might involve a bit of adulting on your own part, right? That part of you that needs to be needed, so you're content for your adult kids to not be self-sufficient while you complain about it but don't do anything about it. Yeah, that's not a terribly adult part of yourself. See, also, the husband you complain about to your friends as an additional kid. You're not being an adult yourself there. Really, happy math. Do you really not like it? Okay? Do you really not like that your husband acts like a big kid? Well, if not, if it's just performative, stop complaining about your man behind his back, okay? If it does really bother you, why aren't you doing something about it? You don't have to get mad at the guy. Just stop doing the things that you think they should be doing. Tell them, hey, I need more help. I'm overwhelmed. Own that. And say, I'd really appreciate it if you could, then, insert chore here. Insert the thing that will really help you out. Trust me, men like to be useful, usually. They like to be helpful. Oh, but he won't do it, is what I hear. You can tell the particular type of person that's saying this, right? He won't do it. He'll say he will, but he won't. And yeah, you're right. He won't at first. He won't. And there are reasons for that. Okay? Typically raised men, I won't say all men are raised in a typical traditional way. They're raised to treat housework as something that you're helping with, something you do occasionally, right? Which means it's usually an absolute emergency when it's time to clean up instead of an ongoing thing. Men can just, if something sits there long enough, if a piece of clutter can sit there long enough, they don't see it anymore. Some women too. I realized I did this with certain things. But yeah, if you want to change the behavior of, the typical man in your life, your usual standards of order and cleanliness are going to slip temporarily. But if you give him a chance and keep saying, it would really help me out if, he'll eventually get it. See how it just went from noble suffering, oh, my husband is like another kid, right? How it went from that noble suffering, that performative, oh, we have it so hard, ladies, right? To owning your part in it. And doesn't feel that fun, like, oh, I feel rebuked. Like that's uncalled for. That's uncalled for. I was just expressing how I felt. No, you were complaining about your husband. And recognizing that is adulting. And again, it may not feel great right now because you just got called out. But in the short term, you're going to be less tired, have more energy, and more time to do the things that you want to do, right? You may understand more the wonder, the happy math of having your own things that you do on your own that are just yours and protected and not something you're doing as a parent or a couple or a friend all of the time. Similarly, guys, I wasn't just going for the ladies, and I know this is heteronormative on Pride Month, but like, okay, this is about the gender of your partner, not about your gender. Okay, so if you've got a wife, man, or ladies, does she nag, insult your video games, do other things like that that lead you to feel disrespected, get passive aggressive, just, have you told her in a non-confrontational moment, not nagging back, just be vulnerable, how that makes you feel? Have you? Or do you just withdraw, shut down, stonewall, maybe begrudgingly just do what she wants instead of talking about it like, a grown-up? But she doesn't understand. You're right. She doesn't. She doesn't understand. Typical women who are taught to girl properly. I failed hard at this, but even this slipped through a little bit, and I had to catch myself with it because girling, learning how to woman, you're taught that if you love someone, you put their needs before your own. And that's wrong, actually, but it takes time for someone who was raised that way to realize that not being able to read your mind doesn't mean they don't love you, right? Just because you can't read her mind doesn't mean you don't love her. You know that. Problem is she doesn't, right? Consider this. Flip the script. Empathy exercise, okay? What did I just tell you, right? If you love someone, you put their needs before your own. That's what she's doing. She's putting your needs before hers. And if you don't want that, be clear. Ask her what's going on, not in a frustrated way. Trust me, guy-coded people, 70% of all of your emotional responses look like frustration to women, okay? And guess what that's communicating you feel about that woman? That primarily she irritates you. So if you're getting the you don't care thing, not expressed the best way, but that's coming from a place of hurt. Think about the last 3 exchanges when you tried to say something was bothering you. Were you vulnerable? Did you show up with your primary emotion? Or did you wrap that in armor of frustration because that was safer? That second thing is not adulting. Why? Oh, but that's tough guy, right? I'm strong. I'm a man. You know what? There's a time and place for that. And that may be what she was attracted to in the short term. But the truth is that is not a relationship dynamic that's going to go anywhere good, right? So work on understanding and communicating what's beneath that frustration. Pick up a few of these romanticy books like A Court of Thorn and Roses. Read the first 2 books of that. Right? Read A Court of Thorn and Roses, read A Court of Mist and Fury, and notice that all these guys who are like real jerks at first, and then they soften up and they're vulnerable. That's what the woman is looking for, right? Or just watch Beauty and the Beast. It's much shorter, right? Well, that's embarrassing though. That's vulnerable. What if it doesn't work? Well, it might not, right? You're responsible for you. You're not responsible for other people. And you can't control their reactions. That's what I mean by top 10 phrase. Be the hero of your own story, not anyone else's. Those superhero comic books of back in the day. Spider-Man, Superman, not Batman. People think of Batman, oh, he's all these women, Iron Man has all these women, but they're not committed relationships. You look at the good guys, right? The really good guys, the guys who have their stuff together, like Peter Parker, Clark Kent. Those women, it didn't work right away. They didn't give Mary Jane and Lois Lane, well, that rhymes, They didn't give those guys the time of day at first. You can't make someone feel a certain way towards you. You can only do your best to be kind and decent and hope that they see that and appreciate that. And someone may still end up believing you're the Antichrist because they're utterly incapable of admitting really that they did anything wrong. But even when that happens, you know deep in your heart of hearts that you were kind and decent. You were considerate. You tried, right? And if the other person is putting a bunch of negative intentions on you that you did not, you didn't have. You have two choices then, adulting, right? You can try to make them see that wasn't your intentions and get really frustrated and lash out and freak out when they don't. Or you can just state, like, that was not my intention and leave it there because you know, right? Because some people, they say all the right emotional things, right? Like, I'm willing to apologize if I did something wrong, right? You'll notice that some people, they actually will apologize. Some people, they never do. They say they're willing to apologize, but they never actually do it. These people, they'll be adamant that you don't understand them. They'll tell you at length everything you're doing wrong because they're deflecting and projecting, right? They don't set an example by being the bigger person, being the adult, and putting you first. These are people who are not emotional adults. Maybe not all the time, but certainly not in that moment, right? And if people never inhabit the activity of adulting, quite frankly, you may be better off without that person. You know, they're never really going to be a good networking contact because they're only going to put you in contact with similarly immature, irresponsible, user people. They certainly won't be a good friend because their definition of a good friend is completely different than yours. These are people who absolutely do not know how to get their own emotional needs met. These are people who have tantrums and expect other people to service their needs. And this is another part of adulting that's poorly understood. What does it mean to meet your own emotional needs? Let's take a break and get into that. Questions, comments, concerns, Liana at nottherapyshow.com. Nottherapyshow.com is the website. At Not Therapy Show on social media. We'll be back with more on what adulting really is. What's underlying all the chores and responsibilities on It's Not Therapy. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back in It's Not Therapy. I'm still Liana Kersner. I'm still not a therapist. We're still talking about adulting. What it really is. It's not just doing laundry and getting oil changes. Let's face it, a lot of people can't afford a car these days. These things, these chores, these day-to-days, they're an extension of effective emotional regulation and time management. And let's face it, modern schooling doesn't teach either terribly well. Modern schooling rewards working yourself into illness and exhaustion, confusing discipline and self-punishment, and then gives you breaks just long enough for you to get maybe 80% of your strength back just to do it all over again next semester. It is a god-awful system in need of reform. It teaches the opposite of checking in with yourself, recognizing how you're feeling mentally, physically, and emotionally, and making the necessary adjustments to meet your own emotional needs. And the concept of meeting your emotional needs, this is a concept that is presented very badly. And so people can have something of a trauma response to hearing this, right? I feel you. I have had this weaponized against me, okay? Some people, even some mental health professionals, don't really understand meeting your own emotional needs. It's one of those things where it's like muscle memory. Once it clicks, once you feel emotionally fulfilled, you're like, oh, this is what it feels like. And then you kind of know how to get back to it. But, when we're kids, when we're not adults, we are dependent on other people for our sense of self, to let us know if we're doing well or if we're doing wrong, right? Our entire self-concept is built on the approval of adults, right? And so we get into adulthood with this weird double-edged sword, right? Because, we need a certain amount of friendship, companionship. Some people think sex is an emotional need. It's the connection. If you're truly talking emotion, right? If you just want that physical gratification, no, that's hedonism. That's not emotion, right? These people think that because emotional needs do involve other people, that other people are required to meet their emotional needs. And if their emotional needs are not met by that person, then that person is abusing them, right? And it's not that simple between two adults, right? Adults are expected to self-soothe to an extent. You're expected to know when you're getting overwhelmed and, say, hey, I need it to slow down. If it's not slowing down enough, say stop. If people don't respect stop, walk away. This is something I know is hard if you're raised in an abusive environment. It is an important skill to learn. There's a huge difference between someone not wanting to make things worse, someone wanting to help you feel better, and you expecting or feeling entitled to another person putting your emotional needs first, or worse, expecting them to appease you. If that person knows that expectation, that they work as, an entertainment committee for you, you're not giving them any space to want to do that. Because under current circumstances, they need to, or else. And a lot of what I learned with this, really that idea of emotional needs, came from dealing with people with various personality disorders. Now, big disclaimer here, not all personality disorders are created equal, obviously, and everything manifests. People are individuals, and a diagnosis doesn't change the fact that every person is an individual. But setting boundaries and meeting your own emotional needs is essential to dealing with people with these conditions, because what the well-meaning mental health experts on this don't tend to get into is spending a lot of time with someone with a personality disorder involves a lot of failure, very painful failures, right? And so having other ways to get those emotional needs met that in a non-destructive way, right? Because that's the damage to your life is the definition of a personality disorder. So, getting your emotional needs met in a healthy way and setting those boundaries, it's essential. Now, there's the big media sensationalized cluster B personality disorders. I'm going to get to those last. I want to get to, group A and C disorders because they get a lot less attention. But, if someone has avoidant personality disorder, that person, by the nature of those conditions, is sometimes going to leave you hanging in social situations, right? That's something you have to factor into your planning. When you plan to go somewhere with someone with AVPD, there is a very good chance they may bail at the last minute. So if you absolutely must go, don't make them your ride, okay? But if you absolutely must go, make it clear in advance, in a non-confrontational way, that look, I understand these are difficult for you, so let's just do it so that if you're not feeling up to it and 6 o'clock rolls around, okay, I'm going to go myself, okay? It's good. Don't rely on someone like that to be your wingman, to say the least. Here's the thing about that, the it's good part. It actually has to be good. You have to emotionally prepare yourself to be okay with possibly going alone, right? You can't say okay and secretly be mad. That's not fair to them. They're gonna find out, and then that's gonna just, that's part of the fear of that condition, right? The less pressure the less social pressure you put on someone with avoidant personality disorder, the more likely there'll be a successful social situation, right? This is hard, but it is doable. It involves a lot of advanced planning, not setting unrealistic expectations on that person, but also yourself. Now, someone with a group A personality disorder, like say schizotypical disorder, well, those people are going to have a lot of intrusive thoughts and a lot of fears regarding other people. They'll have moments where they're untrusting. They'll regress seemingly without warning. They'll be super communicative one week and say almost nothing the next. And it's very important to set and keep checking in with your own internal boundaries so these ebbs and flows don't hurt a lot, right? Setting appropriate expectations and making sure that, well, first of all, that you're not being too dismissive of people with these conditions. That seems to be the path to success in a very tricky diagnosis. You know, people with these group A personality disorders, sometimes their thinking gets a little magical. But even if the scenario they're describing seems far-fetched or impossible, their feelings are still real. And you have to be in touch with your own feelings to empathize without getting enmeshed. And you're going to be frustrated sometimes. You're going to be hurt sometimes. And the problem with the way the mental health industry approaches the loved ones of people with these conditions is the focus is so much on what you have to do with the people with the diagnosis that they don't balance this out with, look, you're not going to get it right all the time. You don't have to be perfect. Nobody's perfect. There's a balance. That message often doesn't get across to the families and other loved ones of somebody with these serious mental health conditions, and it doesn't help. You know, and of course, like I said, I left the sensational ones, the cluster B personality disorders, right? The ones the media loves to sensationalize. There's so many TikToks on, you know, narcissism, borderline, histrionic, antisocial personality disorder. Okay, no joke. These are roller coaster conditions. And at some point, real talk, if you're remotely close to anyone with these conditions, they will blame you for things that are absolutely not your fault and sometimes didn't even happen. It's a marker of the disorder, the instability in relationships is there for a reason. Some people, it's very surface. You know, narcissists don't really feel a sense of possession, or they may see somebody as an extension of themselves, but that deep social connection, not there, right? Borderline people, deep connection in the short term, but very unstable relationships, right? Here's the thing that the descriptions of these conditions don't tell you and make it even more painful. Most of the time, especially if somebody has done extensive therapy with, you know, say they have BPD, that person with BPD is not like this. They're not a collection of symptoms. They're rational, reasonable, even kind, right? The problem is when they're not, look out. And it's really hard if you have no experience with that, the emotional tidal waves, the emotional roller coasters. It's like, what did I do? You feel intense guilt. You feel fear, and it is a journey to set boundaries and meet your own emotional needs in a way that, again, isn't destructive, because the whole point of it being a disorder is that the copes are destructive. And again, the professional advice regarding this stuff, what they don't tell you is it really only works maybe 30% of the time. It is infuriating. And it just exhausts your distress tolerance. The reason they don't tell you is, you know, if you were told at the very beginning, like, yeah, these things I'm going to teach you how to do, they don't work more than they do, but sometimes they do work, so keep trying, right? Who's going to sign up for that, right? There's a lot of guilt that comes with dealing with loved ones with these mental health conditions. And well-meaning professionals, and like I said, they do it for a reason because they want you to at least try. They want you to stick around for a little longer. They tend to make it seem much easier or simple or successful than it actually is. They'll say things like, I know it's the last thing you feel like doing, but, and that's the thing, right? That's where your own emotional boundaries and your own emotional needs come into play. Because only you can decide how much time you're willing to spend doing the last thing you feel like doing in that moment. And that is the truth of dealing with people with these, cluster B conditions. And you're not gonna, I know it's the last thing you feel like doing, but it's really easy to let boundaries slip in that mindset, especially when the high conflict person is actively lashing out and pushing every button you have. Or they're giving you the silent treatment, but then talking to third parties about you. So people are talking, they know you're talking about you, but they're not talking to you. And the other parties are, they're so upset. They feel so bad. They're hurting so badly. They're crying. They can't get out of bed. As if that's your responsibility or your fault. That is not helping. Here's the truth. And this is going to sound callous at first, but hear me out, okay? If you're not prepared to walk away, like really prepared to walk away, you can't enforce your boundaries. You're going to feel coerced and abused, and I tell you, the profoundly mentally ill person does not mean to, even though their behavior is inherently manipulative or abusive. Sometimes that's why it's mental illness, right? And that hurts. And, people with a symptom of impulsivity, they don't have that, hey, maybe I shouldn't do this. They'll say and do thoughtless, hurtful things. And there will be an empathy deficit because they think it's just them being honest. It's just the way they talk, right? Now, when they've calmed down, it's important that they care that what they did hurt you. If they don't, you have the right to walk away, right? That's true of anybody. It's one thing that, okay, they have an illness, you accept that. But the caring, the putting the work in has to go both ways, If they continue to keep trying to make it about how horrible you are, well, you're supposed to go, I understand how you feel. That's not realistic, right? The problem is that the best practice on this is deal with their feelings. And when they're just firing accusations at you, you don't know what those feelings are. And so you try to do what the doctors tell you and say, I understand that you're frustrated. I'm not frustrated. How dare you tell me I'm frustrated? Well, what are you? I'm upset. Yeah, okay, I understand you're upset. Do you? This may sound so familiar, it's triggering, right? You have the right to walk away. You have the right to go, you know what? This person isn't worth it anymore. I repeat, you have the right to walk away. If you don't assert this in yourself, if you don't truly believe this, you're going to come at things from a place of feeling trapped. And if you feel trapped, you cannot maintain the requisite outward calm, it's the last thing in the world you're going to want to do, but here's the thing, you're probably not going to be able to do it anyway, especially if somebody is bombarding you with lengthy texts or private messages at 3:00 in the morning, right? You'll lose it. You're 3:00 in the morning, you're trying to sleep, right? Even if you turn the buzzer off your phone, it's like blink, blink, light, right? Even on sleep mode, that light comes on. You have to turn the phone upside down, right? And then the other person will go, you frightened me. Or they'll criticize you because you lost your ish, right? And you know what? They probably are afraid. But you're not to blame for that. You may have been the inspiration for it, but you are not to blame for it. Meeting your own emotional needs is about separating yourself from that other person's intense emotional tidal waves and recognizing that if you need calm and stability and someone who will listen and validate you, well, that person who's just looking to say how terrible you are in that moment isn't that person. Which means if that's what you need in that moment, you need to get space from that person and find a friendly ear or possibly a crisis line. 3 o'clock in the morning things. In general, I have a rule. I don't do stuff past, it used to be midnight, then it became 11 o'clock, then it became 10 o'clock. It's down to like 9 at this point. If people hit me with something after 9 p.m., not tonight, Satan. If you can't get someone to look you in the eye when things are calm again and find something they can do to work with you, to do things differently, they're not going to, as much as you want them to. Meeting your own emotional needs means recognizing that and either living with the fact that you're not going to get what you wanted from that relationship or getting distance from that person and working to find someone who can, honor agreements. Meeting your own emotional needs means recognizing that reality isn't a bad place if you choose to live in it and accept it. Now, non-adult people, well, thank your Satan for deciding you are not going to engage in the drama. They're not accountable. And them saying something doesn't make it true. And it's very easy to fall into the trap of being terrified of the consequences of people not liking you. And this is the final component of adulting. And this is a part I believe more than anything, younger people are less prepared for than older folks because they weren't given the tools. And I don't have much time, so I'm going to go to my last break, come back at this real quick. Questions, comments, concerns, Liana at nottherapyshow.com. Nottherapyshow.com is the website, at nottherapyshow on social media. Back 1 minute on the last thing about adulting that you're going to do this week on It's Not Therapy. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back in It's Not Therapy. I'm still Liana Kersner. I'm still a therapist. We still only have 1 minute. And oh my God. Okay, so the thing I said young people don't have. They don't have the resilience to deal with people not liking them. They were raised differently than us older folks, and they do not have the life experience to know it's going to be okay. So if you're dealing with a young person terrified of ostracization, cancellation, or all that good stuff, that's the most powerful thing you can say to them. It's gonna be okay. And if they say, no, it's not, keep talking to them, keep listening, empathize with them, give them that 20 minutes. And if you gotta go, set up a new time to talk so they know when it's gonna happen. They can hang on. And I am out of time, so I'll have to talk to you next week. Liana at nottherapyshow.com, nottherapyshow.com, at nottherapyshow. You're crazy is only a problem if it's hurting you. Talk next time.